Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel, Fish Den 365. I'm Den Haring and welcome back to Topwater Tuesday. Doing everything we can here to make Tuesdays just a bit more tolerable. Today's bait is the Heddon Dying Flutter.
That's what I'm talking about.
Alright, so the Heddon Dying Flutter, this bait goes back a long number of years. I believe the original was made of wood. I don't have any of the original Dying Flutters. I imagine they probably have some value to them because this was probably pre-1950s or somewhere in that time frame. And even the plastic ones have changed over the years. The mold had changed where they had a two-part mold where the bait was connected around the middle. The newer ones have the seam down the belly of the bait. They use different spinners over the years. I like these pointed spinners on this particular one. There was a number of years where they were actually using quite a bit of a smaller spinner and it was more rounded on the edges. Different sound. I really like the propellers that come on the baits that I have here. And I have two of them here, and the reason why is you can see how the hook arrangement is on the Dying Flutter. You have a hook in the just a little bit rear of center and then one on the back. And of course, Heddon has this method of putting hooks on that I don't like. They have this kind of hardware here where you can't swing the hook freely around. And for me, that's a problem because, and even on the back you can't because there's no split ring. And so a fish could wedge off. And so when I get a bait, I learned this lesson the hard way over the years. I used to fish this bait a lot back in the 80s, and I used to fish it like this, and I lost my share of fish because, I didn't understand how they were getting off. Over the years, I learned how this was happening, and so what I do now is I take that hardware off. You can see I have this one getting ready to do it. I took the hardware off, and then right in the center, between the two holes for the hardware, I'll put a little hole in the bait. I'll glue these other two holes, and I will put I'll put a little screw eye in there. I'll screw it in and glue it in, put a split ring on that screw eye, and then I'll put my hook on that split ring, and then I'll add a split ring to the back and put a hook on that one as well. Now, when I do that, the hook will be able to move freely around. The bait will still be balanced right because the hooks are in the exact same location they were when it came configured like that. So that's one of the things that I would suggest you do if you want to fish this bait. It takes a little time, but sometimes that's the kind of thing you can do over the winter when you're not able to fish so much. And that's usually the kind of thing that I do. So got this one in progress. Eventually I will have this one modified and ready to go. Looking forward to fishing it again this summer because it's been quite a while since I fished the Heddon Dying Flutter. And I've had good success with this bait. Back in the 80s, I used to fish this quite a bit on the Pocono Mountain Lakes, and it turned out it was always a good bait in June, late May through early June, right through the whole month of June. And most of these topwater prop baits with the propellers are good that time of year. They're good right after the bass spawn, when you have a lot of little fry in the water. When these fry are in the water, sometimes if they're up near the surface, they get scared and they jolt around, and that noise of the spinner actually imitates that noise that they make quite a bit, and so it can excite a bass. If a bass is guarding fry and something tears into that fry to eat it, well, that bass is going to become aggressive with whatever is coming to eat that fry. And so if you make that noise with this bait and that bass looks up and sees this, it might think that this thing is trying to eat its fry and come up and smash it. More of an aggressive hit, not so much out of hunger, but out of trying to protect the fry. So kind of an interesting way to fish this. Also works well when the bluegills are spawning. Bass oftentimes will corral bluegills when they're spawning, and throwing this in those shallows where the bluegills spawn could be another good way to catch bass at that time of year, or even a little later. So how do you fish it? Well, I like to use a standard topwater rod. You need something that you're going to be able to twitch with, something that has a tip that has some play in it, but also has some backbone as well. And so I have this topwater rod that I've been using for many years that is made by Daiwa, Light and Tough series topwater rod. I got 3 of them. That's what I use for my top waters and jerkbait fishing, and I use it for this as well. I like to use a 20-pound braided line, but I'll use a leader, a 1 to 2 rod length leader of monofilament line. I usually use Berkeley XT or Berkeley XL depending on the application. XT I like is for this type of application because it's stiffer line and it is much less likely to wrap around the propeller in the front because the line is stiffer. And I'll go up to 17-pound test for that same reason, to keep the line stiff. And so there's a number of ways you can fish the bait, right? You can use your rod to twitch it, little twitches to make the bait move in little sharp increments, and those spinners will spin and churn the water up as you do it. That can work quite well. Ripping the bait, a sweeping of the rod, where you rip the bait forward 2 or 3 feet, 2, 3, 4 feet, rips forward and stops, rips forward and stops. Another good way to catch fish. Sometimes I'll fish it very subtly. Well, I'll just barely move it forward just a little bit, just to get the spinner spinning, and then stop. And sometimes that'll catch them, especially when you have like dead still days. Sometimes that works. And then lastly, most people, the professional guys will say this is not the way to fish some of these baits, but my experience tells me that's not always true. And that is, you throw the bait out there, you can let the ripple subside, and then just reel it steadily in. And let those spinners make the noise that they make. Just a steady retrieve, steady medium retrieve. I've had days where that worked better than anything else. And so you can't ignore it. You can't throw that out of the repertoire because sometimes they want it that way. And sometimes that catches them when the other methods don't. So keep that in mind as another way of working this particular bait. Lastly, I want to tell you a little secret. Now, some of you guys, I'm sure, know this secret, but some of you guys may not. And I learned this from Zell Rowland, probably back in the early 90s. I went to a seminar of his, and Zell Rowland, if you don't know, he was a professional angler and a top water specialist, known around the world and in professional ranks as maybe the best top water fisherman there ever was. He's certainly in the top 5 or 10 top water fishermen of all time. Knows what he's doing when it comes to top water. He's forgotten more about top water fishing than I'll ever learn. Anyway, one of the things that he said you can do with this bait that I found interesting was mess around with these spinners, messing with the angle of them. So when the spinners are set like this, and this is usually how it comes out of a package, they're kind of bent back on a 45-degree angle. You can see both of these are set up that way. I like it that way. It makes good sound when you do it. But when you move it, in order to get the spinners to spin, you have to move the bait forward quite a bit. So you have to kind of move the bait forward and then they begin to spin, or rip it forward. So that's when they're on that angle. But you can do some things with this. You can straighten these spinners out like that, more like an airplane propeller now. Hopefully you can see the difference. And now the bait doesn't nearly have to go as far in order to get that to spin. So you can make it spin and keep the bait much more closer to a piece of cover. In other words, you can make the bait make these spinners spin, and yet not have to move the bait so far away from cover, because you might want to move the bait 2-3 feet to get them spinning the way you want when they're angled like this back one is. But when they're angled like that front one is, well, you don't have to go so far. And then you can even do more. You can bend these spinners so that they're the other way. See how they're opposite each other? Now this will spin even that much sooner, and you could really keep the bait in the strike zone longer. So you can mess around with these spinners to fish the bait that you want, the way you want to fish. Just beware that if you bend them too often back and forth, they're going to break on you and you're going to have to replace them. Another thing you can do is you can actually take the hook off, put it on here, and fish it the opposite way. But I would rather just bend the spinners because the bait is balanced better that way. I'm going to bend it back to the way it was because generally that's the way I prefer to fish this bait. And the thing about these spinners, they make a good noise. They have like a ringing noise to them, and it's a noise that's been proven for catching fish. Not all spinners are created equally, I can tell you that. I've experimented, my dad and I especially have experimented with the sound of these spinners on these kind of baits for a lot of years. The Heddon Dying Flutter has some good spinners on it, or good propellers, however you want to call it. It's a propeller. So there's another bait out there that's very similar to this bait, and that is the Smithwick Devil's Horse, very similar to the Heddon Dying Flutter. I don't know if I have a devil's horse or not. I might have one somewhere, but I haven't used one in many, many years. But to me, you have your dying flutter fisherman, and for every good dying flutter guy, you have a devil's horse guy. But they're very similar baits. They make very similar noise, and you fish them the same way. So if one doesn't work, you can always try the other and see which one you prefer. Well, that's it on the Heddon Dying Flutter. Hope you got something out of the video. If you did, please hit that thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and if you want to, you can hit that bell. It'll give you a notification for when my next video is coming out. I have a video coming up that I hope to do before the next Topwater Tuesday. I just need time to put it together. It's going to be a good one. It's going to be a subject that I don't think too many people have talked about yet, so stay tuned for that one. And then, of course, I hope to get on the water again. It's been crazy weather lately, a lot of rain, a lot of cloudiness, a lot of wind, and so I'm looking forward to some weather settling. And the striper bite is coming on soon, so I'll be focusing on that soon. Hopefully we'll have some good videos for the stripers coming up. Keep it tuned here. Be safe out there. Hope to see you on the water. And as always, may God bless your fishing endeavors.